Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, a marketing exec, chief jargon buster, and I help ground AI in your practical day-to-day.
And I'm Kyle. I live at the intersection of data, product, and strategy, and I do my best to turn the technical AI chaos into something you can actually use.
We go beyond the overhyped headlines and give you the unvarnished truth about AI, what's real, what's hype, and what actually matters for your business.
Every week, we simplify the complex, spotlight the risks, and give you practical tools to make smarter decisions as the landscape rapidly shifts around us.
From agents to commerce to prompt engineering and vibe coding, we deliver honest insights, actionable strategies, and zero gatekeeping.
Let's dive in.
This is Early Adopter. Welcome back to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. Jess, how's your week been?
It's been pretty good. I was away for a couple of days, so just got back not super late last night, but late enough. It was a fairly long drive, so I was pretty tired when I got home. But no, it was a nice couple days away in the countryside, so it was good. How was your week?
Well, holidays are coming up, so
have you figured out what you're doing for the holidays?
Still have not figured that out.
Oh, your poor dad.
I know. I probably will just host something here for siblings, and maybe I'll be like a catch-all for people who don't have anything to do.
I mean, that's fair. That's what my parents often do. That they take in the Christmas orphans or the holiday.
Exactly.
Orphans.
I'll take in some orphans, but
yeah,
I went to this LA Restaurant of the Week event this week. It was super fun. Tons of different restaurants all around. Got to taste some stuff.
Nice.
And then I did do this Notte Italiana event at Italy yesterday, which I don't know if you're familiar with Italy, Jess, but all Italian
I know Italy.
stuff.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's very good.
You learn your lesson on these things. It's like the first one, they started to close down all the different stations before I could hit everything. So on the second one, we hit it hard early, just make sure we got everywhere. And then did a final pass before the end of the night to make sure we got everything. But crazy, you're at Italy and there wasn't really a dessert station. So there was no tiramisu.
What?
And then the cannoli guy was there in the beginning and I couldn't find him at the end. So I didn't get any cannoli.
Oh my God, this is unacceptable. What's the point of going?
I'm a little disappointed. I was definitely quoting The Godfather quite a bit. Leave the body, take the cannoli, except I didn't get any cannoli.
Oh no.
So,
I forgot to tell you last weekend, I finally saw one battle after another.
I still need to see that.
Okay, well, I won't spoil too much. There were moments that I loved and moments that I really didn't love. It's definitely going to do well at all the awards. I think it was actually all over the Golden Globes this week anyway. Yeah, it was too long. I feel like everything is too long. This is about an hour too long. But that's Paul Thomas
90
Anderson
minutes
for you.
90 minutes so you can get those
I don't want
5
anything
play
longer.
times.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
I remember that from the old days.
No, but it was good. I did enjoy it. Leo is fantastic. Benicio del Toro, I wanted so much more of Benicio. He was amazing.
That's awesome.
The girl that plays the daughter was really good. So it was a shame that it wasn't a tiny bit shorter, because I actually think with the shorter runtime, it would have been a little tighter, a little just overall stronger. I feel like the longer runtime actually weakened it in spots, but I did really enjoy it. So do recommend that you go and watch it. But I meant to say that.
I will definitely be watching that. That is top of my list right now.
Oh yeah,
sure.
I'm sure. It's good one for over the holidays. I'm sure that it'll be hitting the streamers at some point over the holidays.
If I don't have too much Stranger Things to watch.
Oh, you're that far behind on Stranger Things? You haven't seen the new season?
No, I've seen, but
okay.
The second part comes out on Christmas. So
it does, but it's only 4 episodes, right? Have you been watching Welcome to Derry?
Don't even know what that is.
You don't? Oh my God.
No.
It is miles better than Stranger Things. Just saying that. Welcome to Derry is the It prequel. It is.
Oh, see, I don't do scary.
Well, I mean, it is scary, but it is so good. It makes Stranger Things look like a pile of.
I'm willing to give it a
nothing.
try based on your recommendation, but no promises.
Okay, I will flag that there's some stuff in the first episode that you're probably not going to expect. It does throw it out there, but
this is not starting out strong.
I know, but it's so good. Bill Skarsgård is amazing as Pennywise. It does actually have some very funny moments.
Nice.
I thought it was, because I was watching Welcome to Derry at the same time as I was watching Stranger Things, and I'm not going to say, or I'm not going to lie, Derry just blew Stranger Things out of the water.
Well,
Just
we shall
saying.
see. We shall
We shall.
see.
Okay. Anyway, before we jump before we jump into our topic of the week, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping reminder to make sure that you are following us on social media. If you aren't already, we are at early_adopter everywhere. And remember, there is no E in adopter.
And as a heads up, we're taking the next few weeks for the holidays off.
Yes.
So we'll be doing some best of episodes. We've got a ton of content from the last year that people keep coming back to, and I think are still as relevant today as they were then.
I agree.
So we figured we'd give you a chance to catch up on some of our most popular episodes if you missed them.
So today we are doing something a little different. We are combining our AI news of the week into our main topic of conversation because we had to pull together a bit of a last minute emergency pod because of some big AI news that was announced at the end of this week. So today we are bringing someone in to help us break down what is possibly one of the most important business stories of the month. And actually, what's interesting is I think a lot of people are focusing on it as entertainment news, but I think it's much bigger than that.
Last week, Disney announced $1 billion deal with OpenAI to license their characters into Sora. So this means Mickey Mouse, Darth Vader, all the Marvel, Pixar, and Disney characters, quite a bit. At the same time, they've sent Google a cease and desist letter saying Google is infringing on Disney's copyright on a massive scale with their AI services.
And so I think the main takeaway is, oh, Disney's going to be getting into AI now. You know, how disrupted is Hollywood going to be? Like, what a big deal this is for Hollywood. And it absolutely is. There is no denying that it is an enormous story for Hollywood, but we think it's not the only story.
Yeah, one of the kind of underlying stories is how Disney is showing every IP-based company how to navigate the AI landscape. And not just big companies, founders or business owners who have built anything with brands, characters, creative assets. I think this blueprint matters for everyone, especially everyone listening here, long before you're Disney-sized.
I mean, there's no guarantee that everyone's going to be Disney-sized. That's the dream, right? But there's plenty of independent creators out there. There's independent content creators. There's independent game studios. You know, there's a lot of people who have their own IP. And so this is, you know, an important thing for people to be aware of. So we brought our friend Rich into the conversation today. He's been involved in this space on a number of levels, and we actually brought him in to talk about something else completely. So we will still have that conversation at a later date. But when this news was announced, we wanted to get his take on it as well, because he is a longtime film industry professional. So we thought he would be a great one to talk to.
All right, let's get into it, Jess.
Welcome to the podcast, Rich. Hi, Rich. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Jess. Hi, Kyle. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me along. And so my name's Rich Welsh. I'm a long-time Hollywood employee through various companies. So I've worked in the industry for a long time. I started as a sound engineer working on movie soundtracks, then moved into digital cinema and worked a lot with theatrical releasing, particularly with the big Hollywood studios. Briefly had a stint as a university lecturer before doing a startup. That startup was around automation for theatrical releasing. I sold that startup and worked for the acquiring company for a while, looking at everything around AI. We'd done some machine learning, deep learning development in my startup. So we carried that over into the new company. So I looked at AI in media, particularly most recently at production, post-production workflows. And I have recently quit to do a kind of portfolio career. So now I'm president of SMPTE, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers,
Nice.
which is...
To be fair, that's a real mouthful.
I know, it's a lot easier to just say SIMPTE, which is why everyone says so. So president of SIMPTE, I've done 1 year, I've got another year to go doing that. I am chairman of a company called Volustore, which is around 3D scanning, asset management, rights management, and reuse across platforms. And I am also involved in a VC fund, which is a kind of Hollywood, Silicon Valley joint VC fund looking at seed funding for startups. So there you go. That's
Well,
my bag. But it's always
that's
been
it.
Hollywood. I
Yeah.
guess is kind of the point. Even though I've always been UK based, spent a lot of time in LA, a lot of time working with Hollywood studios, and that's kind of my comfort zone, I guess.
And that is how Kyle and I know you as well, because we knew you
Yes.
from your startup days when we worked with you at Real D.
Yeah, I would almost think of you as an LA guy, Rich, with how much we spent time in LA. The accent gives you away, but
it's useful in LA because people attribute like a lot more intelligence to you than you may, in fact, have just through the accent.
Well, as people will find today, there's still plenty of intelligence there. So I'm very excited to have you on the pod talking about a big announcement. We're going to talk about a larger story next week about the AI kind of ecosystem and if there's a bubble and all of that. But
which is why you were originally supposed to be on the podcast.
Which is why we originally scheduled.
Exactly, but we got sidetracked.
The bubble got bumped out of the news schedule by even bigger announcements.
It kind of did. It kind of did.
Well, and I think that's an interesting segue because normally we would talk about our weeks and what happened and what we did and all of that. But this week, something big happened, which kind of took over our week. So that's, I think, what we're going to talk about today. So we can give people kind of a breakdown of what's happening and maybe give a little bit of analysis. Because as you identified, Rich, there's not a ton out there right now. So it's a little bit of us just kind of guessing.
Let's go a little bit more in depth on what the big announcement is, because we kind of alluded to it in our intro. This was announced on, I believe, Thursday or Friday of last week, so early December. And basically, Disney have taken a $1 billion equity stake and licensed their IP to OpenAI for use with Sora. And as a reminder, Sora is their video generation tool. At the same time, I believe on the morning of the same day, they also issued a cease and desist to Google. So on one hand, they're saying, okay, we're going to give our characters and our IP to OpenAI. At the same time, they're saying to Google, you've been training on our copyrighted IP. You're not allowed to do that. So they're really, really having a pretty big statement around all of this.
Yeah. And I think it's important to just kind of look at what the scope is of that. So the scope is they've licensed about 200 or so characters. So that's your Mickey and Minnie Mouses, your Darth Vaders, your Marvel characters, Pixar characters, but it explicitly carves out or excludes likenesses and voices. So it's removing the human actors, which I think is really important. And obviously, maybe even something that's just really tricky for them to do. Obviously, there was the strike that happened last year. Those negotiations are coming up. So obviously, that was a very intentional move, maybe one to kind of get this deal across quicker than having to bring in a lot of the human actors. What do we think that signals? And Rich, you're kind of probably have quite a bit of contacts in the industry. How is this being treated or being felt by that group?
Well, it's certainly got people talking a lot and thinking. I mean, the first thing to say, like if I was just doing contract negotiation, I would do the same thing as they did, which is that you couldn't do the cease and desist with Google early because it would have just telegraphed that something was going to happen and would have taken all of the wind out of their sails with the press release with OpenAI. As you said, we don't really know what that equity deal is. We assume it's pretty favorable terms against the $1 billion investment. And there will be quite a lot of cost attached to actually training the models to do a really good job. I think there's an advantage. And I think this is the first thing that I'd sort of thought about. And friends of mine have mentioned to me is like, right, well, no real actors. So you're avoiding the uncanny valley problem. Because it's much shallower valley when you talk about animated characters versus real humans. I think realistically the rights around that is the big deal there, and there's no way this deal would go over the line right now with actors being involved, especially the heavyweights who tend to feature in the big Disney franchise movies. So I think realistically that could only happen that way, but it's got lots of really interesting applications. So I think that side of it is the bit that I'm seeing immediate interest in, is like, right, okay, how are they exploiting this? Because actually that's what people worry about with not worry about, but let's say investing in AI at the moment, especially for anyone who's small. The big studios, it's one thing, but anyone who's smaller, investing in it, you're like, what's my ROI on that? So they're
Mm-hmm.
looking very closely to see what Disney do with this, because it could lead to all sorts of new avenues for them to basically exploit that content. So I think it's very interesting from that point of view. Definitely a lot of talk. What I'm not seeing, interestingly, is any real nervousness around it. I've seen some,
Interesting.
scare stories, the usual LinkedIn fodder of like, this is the end of Hollywood and all that, but everything's the end of Hollywood. The end of cinema has been coming for about 100 years. So, it's
Yeah,
like,
that is true.
it's
I
just
think
what it is.
there's also some interesting context within the last couple of months with Disney in particular. The first thing is that they announced in their earnings call, which was a couple of weeks ago, that they were looking into AI generated content for Disney Plus. And also you have to remember they have invested in Epic Games, which owns Fortnite, and they have been looking into this sort of thing for a little while. So I think while it's surprising that they went with OpenAI and Sora, given how much they pushed back when Sora launched a couple months ago, Disney have clearly been thinking about this for a while. And actually that partnership with Sora and the ability to put the guardrails on things, and we can talk more about the guardrails later, because I think that's a really big part of the conversation. But clearly it's a path to get them to that AI generated content an awful lot faster. And the UGC content, user generated content, it's essentially a shortcut to get them to that point. Because if they were trying to do that themselves, it's going to be an awful long time before they get to that. Whereas that Sora partnership, they have the control, so they can control their characters a little bit more than they would have been if it had just been Sora doing its own thing. And it gets them to that UGC North Star that they've been talking about for the last couple of weeks.
Rich, you brought up something interesting about how maybe some of the other studios and how the rest of the landscape is reacting to this. I mean, one of the components of this is other studios watching this and seeing how it plays out. There's definitely a potential conversation around what does a first mover advantage get you in this. One of the pieces of this is the Disney gets an exclusivity window. So they get early access before other studios can license similar characters to Sora or other competing models, which could eventually become a bit of a moat. So it could potentially help them, especially because I think this is a 3-year deal. So what do you think are the benefits of Disney being a first mover in this, making this marquee deal and maybe preempting some of the other studios and what they're doing? And how do you think the other studios might respond to it?
Yeah, I guess a two-part answer to that then. The first, I would say nobody ever does a deal like this without having tested it extensively first. So they will already have a pretty comprehensive GTM. They will know how they're going to launch this and how they're going to bring it to customers. I think having a platform is massive. I'll come back to that, because I think that part of the second answer is the platform component, because it gives them a lot of control. So you're not just literally going, right, okay, if it's all via Disney Plus, let's say, then you're not just going in store and making stuff and then putting it up on your own YouTube. Now, I don't know that is precluded from happening under this deal, but I also think that their primary kind of goal here is to enhance the features and functions in Disney Plus and make it much more personalized. Content personalization has always been a big deal. But I come back to this point, right? Nobody goes into a deal like this without having some really good testing under their belt. They will have been trying this out. They probably tried it with multiple providers. I don't think there would have been a tender process, because of this type of deal would have been way too complex, especially with like an investment in the business itself. So I think that part of it will have been, just a unique thing between OpenAI and Disney. But the testing 100% will have happened, and they will already know that they are very successful with that model if they customize it, etc. And that's, I think, why they would be going down that road. So I think the first mover advantage is probably bigger than it seems, because they will already know that they're ready to go to some extent. There may be some, detail around the go-to-market, but they're going to be ready with product fairly quickly, is my guess. But the part two of that, in terms of what are the other studios, how do they react and what would they do about it? Well, you're right in some respects if the exclusivity and Sora is like the only game in town, but it's not. We see this with generative video models all the time, and they're always kind of bumping up past each other. So one week it's Kling, another week it's Sora, and so on. And then it's Runway. And we just see that they keep getting better and better. And so those models obviously are always being improved. There's various sort of facets to that, but at the end of the day, customizing a model on your franchise, I mean, any company building these foundational image and video models will more or less bite your hand off for that. So I think the bit that maybe has not necessarily been explored too much at this point is the whole Netflix bid on Warner Brothers
I
and
was about to
obviously
ask
Paramount
if,
counterbid.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think for Netflix it makes a lot of sense because they suddenly inherit 102 years worth of franchise content generation.
Library, yeah.
Yeah, and that library is huge. And then again, they've obviously Disney have Marvel, but Warner's have DC. So
Yep.
yeah.
And all the gaming franchises that come with Warner Brothers too. I mean, you were talking about animated characters. I mean, there is just a huge library of, gaming, but, animated characters that they now have access to.
Yeah, and I've actually looked at some of the research I'd done was around actually interaction as in a gamified environment. So looking at franchise content and then interaction with the characters. And I think that's going to be a really big play here. We could like super leap forward and, into like a kind of an end game metaverse. But the point being that you want to be able to interact freely and naturally with famous characters out of movies and famous people, right? So that can only realistically happen with an AI back end. You can't be, there's no possible way to create something without it that you can interact with. So I think that is going to be what we see coming through quite quickly, that you can interact with the characters in game.
Yeah.
And maybe in unique environments that are built around that franchise as well. So there'll be an immersive component to that.
Yeah.
That is definitely what they were talking about with their earnings report, like that sort of interactive gaming. So
and that's
they're keen to hit the ground running quickly.
Yeah. And even, I mean, if you look at other types of content, so reality show content, there are already interactive games for reality shows where you can interact with cartoon versions of the contestants on those shows. Like Love Island has that already. And so, it's not a huge extension to think that becomes more and more real over time. I don't think that we are really scratching the surface of what's possible with that. But at the same time, it's not going to be a big surprise to anyone when this happens. And I was thinking from the advertising point of view, interaction and personalization is huge. And that's something advertisers are going after a lot more aggressively, I would say, than the studios. So there's some catch up there that they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that built-in known IP, especially, I think the whole thing is super interesting. It's just such an interesting, it's like a 180-degree shift from what Disney used to be like about their IP. I mean, you remember the days when you couldn't even put a video of someone singing a song from Frozen on YouTube. And now it's actually just something that they're really encouraging. I think that's so interesting.
I was actually thinking about that, Jess, and I realized we were talking about this and we were thinking about how that's such a shift. I almost actually can see how Disney has gone from where they were to now, because I think actually a big part of this is the control aspect. And in some ways, what was happening with AI and all this generation was outside of their control. And now with this big investment, they now can actually set the pace with OpenAI to set up the guardrails and to set up a lot of the controls to keep, I guess, that reputational component, or to keep access and kind of be pushing OpenAI on what people can and can't do with their characters. So I've almost done a 180 myself to look at this and go, I see why Disney is doing this, because they want to basically keep the ecosystem going the way they want it to go. So Rich, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I'm sure you've dealt with Disney a lot over the years and are very familiar with how controlling they can be around their IP.
Yeah, well, I don't want to set any of my friends or colleagues over there. But I mean,
we mean this in the best way possible.
All the value is in the IP, right? Yep. So obviously 100%. They want to protect that. But there's control and there's control. And I think if you think about this like as an extension of where we are today in terms of how content more generally is created. Think about an event like Comic-Con. You've got all these fans, some of whom are very influential, i.e. influencers, creating content. If Disney were going around stopping them dressing up as their characters and not allowing them to do their influencing, they're literally hurting their own marketing, because those people have fan bases who they can generate quite a lot of,
Well,
momentum around a particular movie being released or whatever. And so this is kind of really only an extension of that from my point of view. The user generated content that might come out of this becomes like fan content. And trying to stop that feels counterintuitive in a modern environment where that part of the content life cycle is so important. The influencers and the content creators. Now, they themselves can be quite transient, but the franchises that they're effectively helping promote are very, very long-term, sticky kind of IP that, you know, they can take advantage of that in the short term, and longer term, it helps the whole thing. So, yeah, I see if you're doing that, you want to keep control about how that's done.
Yeah.
Effectively, it's a bit like going to Comic-Con and going, your costume's not good enough. Let me help you make it better. You know?
Yeah.
So that is exactly what it is, because I have a funny Comic-Con story about almost exactly this. I was there like years ago when I was at Real D. We would go to Comic-Con a lot, and we were there with Disney for some reason. I can't remember why. I think we were showing them around because it was like before they really started going to Comic-Cons in London. Obviously, they'd always gone to San Diego, but not the London one. And so we were going around with people from their marketing team, and we were in like the trade show floor bit where everyone's selling the merch and stuff. And there was at the other end of the aisle, there was someone selling some merch with Disney princesses doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. And I remember the guy from Comic-Con who was taking us around was like desperately trying to prevent them from seeing that. And of course, you know, they've got their little radar. So they made an absolute beeline for that. And you could just see them like mentally taking notes. But actually, I think that's a good point, because I would be really interested from a technical perspective. How do you put those guardrails on? Like, how do you prevent Disney princesses from doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or Mickey doing something we shouldn't be doing? You know, I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Well, I
from
mean,
the technical side of things.
That's hard work. And actually, guardrails is something I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about, because they're not that hard to break. Like, it's pretty easy to prompt your way out around guardrails. And my kids were doing it like within a week of ChatGPT launching. They already had it doing lots of things it shouldn't be doing, and they were already fairly disillusioned with it. Like, oh, this is just like a magic trick. It's not real. And they lost interest as soon as they knew they could break all these rules almost. It was like weird.
Interesting.
But the point is still there. Guardrails are literally guardrails, and people who are experienced at jumping will go over them. And that's true in real life, and it's true with AI. And so, you know, the only way to avoid those things is literally never have the training data in there in the first place. That horse bolted a very long time ago. Yeah. Even if the foundational models apparently never trained on the specific copyright IP, again, it's very hard to just go scrape the internet for pictures without finding a lot of pictures of people dressed up as Darth Vader for Halloween and things like that. So the Disney IP is in there, even if they completely avoid Disney specific content. So you're going to end up with the ability to create these characters. Again, this comes back to the point, you might as well do it properly, so you're not getting like terrible versions of them. I mean, they even parodied their own thing with Darth Vader with the, I can't remember the name of the character, but in Toy Story, and I think the second or third one, they've got the kind of the evil guy. And
I know exactly which one. I can't remember what his name is.
You know, but that's kind of like what you would get out of Gen AI quite early on. It was like, but,
And it's, I think that guardrails conversation is important too, because we're also seeing how not only can you hop over, but those guardrails degrade over time. So there are a lot of ways out of it. But I like your analogy with Comic-Con. People are going to go and create this content. They're going to go dress up like Darth Vader. But again, to your point, how can we help your Darth Vader be better or more accurate? And, you know, it is ultimately going to help the people who want to exist within the guardrails. So the people who are dressing up and are trying to influence for their fan base, this is going to help and really unlock a lot for them. So there are a lot of pros. There are going to be the cons, and there are going to be bad actors, but this does really help a lot of the good actors do a lot more very quickly.
So I have an important question about looking forward, because Kyle and I were talking about this the other day. So obviously we now have Disney characters in Sora. Fine. If the other studios sign on to these sorts of deals? Because we know, once one falls, the rest of them are going to likely go as well. So let's say Warner Brothers signs on. Do you think you're going to be able to start mixing worlds? Like Kyle was talking about putting, what was it? Batman in with a Marvel character or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but do you think that they're going to allow that?
I mean, how do you stop it? Like,
Well,
what if
that's
you
the
just
question.
go, right, I just want to generate these against a green screen background so I can comp them myself later. And I can do the interaction through prompting and chop together whatever I like. Now, people are getting better at pretty good post-production skills. So putting 2 videos together or even 3 or 4 videos together into one coherent video is not hard. So, I don't think you're going to be able to stop that. Essentially, a bit of manual labor and you're there. So I think probably within a model, I don't know. I mean, again, why would you even bother trying to stop it? It's so easy to do without needing the model to do it inside. But I was thinking about another kind of like a slightly different facet of that, which is, as you said, like it was more about the world building part of it. I think this is a step towards world building. For the studios, because filmmakers already do that, right? If you go to, film school at like UCLA or wherever, they teach you about world building. So creating the world in which you set your story. And if we like skip forward again to gamification or even like full metaverse, you need to be able to do world building. Now, there's a lot of other components to that, probably another episode around spatial intelligence as opposed to LLMs, which are extremely limited in that respect. But a step towards that is the ability to create these interactive characters, because then later it becomes a lot easier to insert them into those environments, and you can do it sort of step by step. I think going full blown at a full virtual environment where you could explore the Star Wars universe and interact with all the characters, it's a lot to do out of the gate. But an initial interactive video or just a customized, personalized video is a very nice, easy step on that path. So yeah, I think that's another reason why it makes sense for all studios to pursue this, because I think interaction with content in that sense will definitely become a bigger thing.
Rich, that makes me think of Ready Player One, one of my favorite
100%.
books. Great movie, but obviously Warner Brothers released that and they licensed so much content, but it was all about how they built worlds around that and then had, characters interacting with those worlds.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of a walled garden. I think the Ready Player One idea is how it will eventually manifest, where you can actually go between environments. And there's lots of steps on the way to that. It's definitely something I've been exploring myself for a while. I'm already sold on that. It's just not really clear how long that really takes.
Yeah.
Good augmented reality glasses is the first step, because at the moment, every kind of immersive experience that's individual is just so clunky. So until we can get over that hurdle, I think the other bits are harder to do. Yeah.
I've been focusing a lot on publishers, so the New York Times and the Financial Times and that sort of stuff, around the licensing deals that they've been working on. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different than this sort of deal, because we're kind of seeing a couple of different types of licensing conversations that are going on. There's lump sums, and then there's kind of a pay per use type thing, and that's both for training and AI overview. So it's a bit different than this Disney thing, and obviously we don't know a ton of details about the Disney thing yet. But do you also think that this is a potential source of revenue for Disney as well? What we've seen with Microsoft have launched a content marketplace that a bunch of publishers have joined, where basically if you're People magazine, who get paid for every time your content is used for training or for an AI overview or whatever it is. Do you think we'll see something like that with the Disney content or with the Disney IP as well?
I think training marketplaces definitely is a very big growth area, especially with like high quality data. So that includes high quality creative data. I mean, there's a lot of question marks around the whole creative process and even just the ethics of that. So without getting into any of that, I think firstly, yes, content training marketplaces. Whether Disney want to openly sell their stuff on a marketplace, I don't know. I would guess not. I would say this deal speaks to the opposite, which is that we're going to do very specific deals with companies on an individual basis over our IP. And that would fit with how Disney have typically done these types of deal before. Not around AI, but around, licensing out their IP.
Mhm.
More broadly, yeah, totally. IP licensing to marketplaces is going to be a thing. I think, though, the rights side of that is so difficult. I mean, you only have to look at the Runway Lionsgate deal to see that it
Yeah.
actually was very hard to implement because of the rights attached. And suddenly people are like, well, you can't just help yourself to my performance or my likeness. But that said, those things are not insurmountable. If you look at FIFA, the football game, they license not only the likeness, but the actual performance, if you like, of the athletes in the game. So the football players trademark celebrations when they score a goal. FIFA have complete rights to use those within the game, right? Now, the individual deals that might be done with a top tier footballer going to be very different to the ones they're doing with let's say, the more general players who don't maybe have that much clout. But the point is that licensing is there, and it absolutely does not preclude FIFA from doing that in the game. So there is precedent, firstly, for that. More generally, kind of capturing people, and more than just their image, but also their voice, sound, and even mannerisms, gait, all that kind of stuff. But secondly, I think that because the rights landscape is so complex, we're going to see, I think, specific marketplaces for individuals. In fact, I know companies working on that right now. And I think that's, those people are quite far ahead with it, because effectively they know that this is going to be something that individuals will want to control, and they already do to some extent, and there's been work from agencies like CAA in LA to manage rights for actors in terms of that. So sorry, this is a bit of a rambling answer, but
Well, no, but I think they're
point being
not.
that you can sell that, right? If you want to
Yeah.
make an advert with that actor in, and the actors doesn't want to turn up, they can still sell their likeness for the advert to be made. And
Well,
that's quite powerful.
that is. And it's something that we've seen already with James Earl Jones licensed his
Right.
voice and likeness for Darth Vader. So that could continue on. Because look, he's in his 80s at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe is he older than that? But at some point he's gonna want to, fully retire. And his voice is Darth Vader. So it totally makes sense. And from his perspective, it's very smart.
Well,
Something
and I believe one of the drivers for that was not just for him, but for his family estate, that it was
I love
something that
that,
would
yeah.
live on beyond him. So
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
even when,
Well, smart.
yeah.
Very
So
smart.
and that's actually has been a challenge for other people, actors that have passed away and then have been used in movies, and the family are like, hold on. Like,
What?
I would love for them to remaster Tron Legacy with Jeff Bridges' face. Just like, it was so good at the time, but now I watch that movie. Well, unfortunately this is giving a lot away, but I watch that movie at least once a year. One of my favorite movies of all time. But
is that one of your Christmas movies?
It's an all the time movie, Rich. if there's a good opportunity to watch Tron, I will watch it. So
we all have
any,
those movies.
not that anyone from Disney is listening, but hey, if you wanted to just go touch up that bit, that would be amazing. I will.
Well, you'll be able to do it for yourself in a minute. So
yeah, there you go.
Just regen that shot and put it back in. No worries.
No, but I do think that answer, because the thing is the content publishers, or the text publishers, I should say, are not like for like with the visual content, right? It's not an exact match. But I think the idea of visuals as a source of revenue is really, really interesting, especially for media companies that are perhaps, struggling a little bit at the minute, because that's what we're seeing with the content publishers, is like licensing their their content for rag training and things like that, which is really interesting. So I think maybe this is the first step towards those sorts of deals that we've been seeing on the text publishing side of things.
Yeah, I think that brings up an interesting angle, because we started out talking about the OpenAI deal with Disney, but then also Disney sending Google a cease and desist.
Yes.
So there's obviously been a lot of litigation in the space, but now we're seeing some of these licensing deals coming out. Why do we think that this is happening now versus maybe a little bit earlier or later? Putting that into the context also of some of what's going on with the guilds and the strikes last year and those negotiations coming back up. the landscape is really shifting, and there is a interesting kind of point of like, why are we seeing this now? And what do we think this signals for where things might be moving and how fast things might be moving from user generated content and more licensing deals?
I mean, copyright's complex, very complex. And recently, obviously, the law was passed in the US. The US Copyright Office said that generative content cannot carry copyright, and it has to have been like handled by a human. Now, that would be a really good reason to control the platform that does the content generation so that you can monetize it in the way you want to without needing to worry about the fact that the copyright issue means that, effectively, if it comes out of a generative AI, your cannot be copyright. Now, there is a challenge there, and I can't see a big studio not trying to sue someone, for instance, for releasing a generative movie that totally steals their IP, even if it doesn't technically break copyright law. But, it's got to be something you have to think about. I think the other side of that is that is just the US law, right? It's not the same in Europe. It's not the same in the UK. It's definitely not the same in Asia Pacific. So, copyright law is all over the place. It's very hard really to protect content. I think this is a good example of not allowing the market to decide, but you stepping in front of that and putting your own control in place. I think it's a smart move. That's, as a studio with a lot of IP to protect, you can't just let this happen organically, especially, in fact, the legislation part is so complicated that, like, why put that to chance? Just put your own commercial model around it that protects your IP. And then you don't have to worry so much about the kind of the legal protections.
Well, and also getting to license that user generated content. Think about how obviously YouTube and its consumption trends around a lot of younger generations really moving towards YouTube and user generated content. This also provides a really nice path for Disney and studios or the more traditional entertainment technologies to start to benefit from a lot of that user generated content. So they're not left behind from that as well. And they can take a piece by licensing out anything that, someone creates. If they use Disney characters, they can license that out and have a huge, maybe new revenue stream.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. And who isn't going to want to make a 5-minute Cars video specifically for their 5-year-old kid's birthday or whatever that talks to them? And, that is you definitely pay for that as a parent. I mean, I'm saying that as a parent. My kids are too old. They wouldn't care, but but to be honest, I might pay for a customized Star Wars video or something like that.
Well, our friend Sean, who we do a lot of stuff with, and he's been a guest on the podcast as well. We were actually just talking about that the other day because his daughter is a big Darth Vader fan. And he was saying he was going to create a video for his daughter. One thing I'm really interested in getting your take on, Rich, because obviously you are still pretty heavily embedded within the creative community, is have you had any thoughts, feelings, feedback from the creatives on this deal?
Mostly actually from people running creative businesses. So, in the visual effects post-production space, and their initial one, I mean, I think everyone's still just trying to make sense of it because it's not that long being
out in the only a couple days.
I don't think it changes much personally because the models are capable of doing today what they were capable of yesterday and will be tomorrow. The fact that it's going to be more accurate and better at a certain subset of IP probably doesn't change things very much for anyone. I think the implications might be the thing that would worry people the most. Every time any studio makes any move to support generative AI, the natural, possibly paranoid, but maybe not, response is, well, this is the thin end of the wedge. This is where it becomes acceptable to use generative AI for IP. And then what's the next step? And what's the next step? And am I out of a job in the future? I think, you can do a whole episode on jobs and AI anyway, but
we've done it already.
Right, that way. I don't think it changes much in that respect. I think we're either on a path to those things or we're not. But what I do think is that it legitimizes the use of generative AI a little bit more. And it does allow you to start to look at use cases in what we could call professional media, as as opposed to user-generated content. And there's been a lot of pushback on that. So I'm interested to see how this changes the public perception, which has generally been behind the creatives, in the backlash or the vocal backlash has been against Gen AI.
Mm-hmm.
There haven't been loads of people out there massively flag waving for it, going, this is brilliant, more Gen AI. Most people are like, I don't like it. I don't like how it's not right and it's not real. So I think right now sentiment is behind the creative community.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think I would worry about that if people start to think that Gen AI is completely fine and normal. So that would be where this, like I said, becomes the thin end of the wedge. It's a very interesting time.
And as that kind of uncanny valley starts to get less canny, if you will, or whatever the right term for that is, but as the AI actor component gets better and better, I could see that being a bigger concern and worry. And so probably something they need to get out in front of now to make sure that they're preparing for a future.
The unions already are. We've seen what happened with SAG-AFTRA last year, and they're talking about, how they might reinforce those rights now because the landscape's changed so quickly. If you jump over the pond here to the UK, Equity are voting on the use of AI and even just being scanned. So 3D scanning, which is a big component of filmmaking, you scan actors, props, sets, and that's used very widely in VFX, and in fact has been for a decade. So this isn't something new, but the concern for the actors unions is that 3D scan may be somehow abused to make, for instance, a generative version of the actor that they have no control over. And I think that's where we'll see more play in the space of rights management, specifically as a commercial component of what actors are doing and owning the rights to their own likeness and so on. But also in terms of the contract side, it's going to be a big deal. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to be played out there, but the unions for sure, at least from the actors side, are really grabbing this with both hands because they know they're the first ones effectively, they're literally in front of the camera. So they're the easiest kind of part to synthesize, I suppose. And that's that's the challenge for them.
So Rich, we should wrap it up, but you're in a really interesting space, and we definitely will talk a little bit more about this when we get into our conversation with you around the AI bubble. But you are in an interesting space because you are a startup founder, you're a VC, and you're obviously really heavily involved with all of this stuff as well. And obviously our audience, we tend to aim towards founders, entrepreneurs, small business owners, etc. With something like this, is there anything that you think, because everyone has their own version of IP, even if you're a startup. I was saying earlier, there's independent game studios, there's, cartoonists, there's lots of people who are creative who have these sorts of things. Do you have any tips or anything that you think our audience should be aware of with something like this? Because Disney's obviously the biggest of the big, but this is going to trickle down at some point as well.
I actually think this could be positive for the smaller studios or even individual creatives. This has been something that's been very difficult for anyone to protect. And actually, if you publish your work on the internet, even if it's like not, if it's for sale, but you've got the pictures of it and, if it's an illustration, that becomes really difficult because that is kind of like open season for people training AI models. So protecting your work is challenging if you want to get it out there at the same time as protect it. I think this could be positive for that. I think looking into that from a more of a startup and investor point of view, I think it's actually more important than ever to kind of protect your IP because it's easier than ever to kind of synthesize. And the last thing you want is your business plan flopping out of, a GPT 4.0, whatever thingy.
Whatever they're on right now, 5.10.
It's like Rocky movies. There's always another GPT coming,
Every week, right?
I mean, in all seriousness, protecting your IP in that respect, I think is certainly something that you need to think about. But also, like, just look around at what's there and take advantage of it. Take advantage of the momentum as well, because that's real. And when we talk about the bubble, there's a different component of the financial risk of that. But But yeah, I think the momentum around AI is something that you have to grab right now. But yeah, just think about how you keep your own IP as well protected as possible.
I like that as a practical step, basically the two sides of the coin, which is learn how to protect your own IP. There's a lot, I'm sure we could get into some tactical ways to do that, but at the same time, also benefit from this. You now have access to some great creative. You can play around with that. You can find ways to do more with less in some ways. So, which is great for our audience, obviously, who have capacity constraints and bandwidth and all of that. So I love that kind of practical, suggestion or tip for the group.
Great.
Well, I think it's just the world we live in. You have to get on with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
As we always say, we always say that, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going anywhere. So it's how can you make it work for you? And also how can you control it as much as possible? And I think that's exactly what Disney did, right? If you can't beat them, you join them. And that is...
this is the boss level version of that move.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with $1 billion behind it.
Yeah. Well, just a little bit. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this, Rich. Obviously, it's still super early days with this announcement. It's only been, over the weekend that people have had time to digest it. But I think we've had some good conversations.
Yeah.
And we
Thanks,
look forward
guys.
to bringing you back on again and we'll talk to you again about the AI bubble. All right. So speaking of AI-generated content, this actually dovetails quite nicely from our conversation about Disney. For AI gone wrong this week, we've got McDonald's in the Netherlands and what might be a particularly tone-deaf use of generative AI in a brand campaign.
Yeah, this is a good one. So McDonald's Netherlands dropped a Christmas ad on December 6th that was completely AI generated, with the concept being the most terrible time of the year. And so this ad showed, Christmas chaos. It was Santa and traffic jams, Dutch cyclists slipping in the snow, which for those of you who have been to Amsterdam, you know how big of a deal cycling is, especially in Amsterdam.
I've almost been run down on a number of occasions by Dutch cyclists.
Yeah, I mean, cyclists have the right of way in that
sure
city,
do.
right?
And they do not give a shit. They will knock you over.
100%. So the message was basically like, and this is kind of crazy. The message is abandon your family and come eat at McDonald's to escape the holidays.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a weird concept to begin with, but the execution is kind of where it falls apart because the faces of the characters were distorted, the motion was really jerky and like a little uncanny valley. And it basically just looks like someone stitched together a bunch of short AI clips, which is kind of exactly what they do, because that is essentially how you can do these sorts of longer generative videos. And it just generally did not look good.
Yeah. So what happens when you rush something that doesn't look good out into the world?
Well, we're going to get into that. They didn't rush it. That's the worst part. Continue.
Well, let's just say it looked rushed.
Yes.
Exactly. It looked chopped together. So what happens? People immediately started roasting it. And, the result was within 3 days, McDonald's pulled the ad.
The most interesting part of this is that the production company came out and defended themselves. And they said, this wasn't some quick AI stunt. We spent 7 weeks on this with 10 people working full time. It used thousands of takes and they treated it like a high craft production.
I really I still don't understand that. That is, how did that happen? I feel like 7 weeks, 10 people full time, you could have generated it traditionally. So I don't get it.
Exactly the problem, because they obviously did put the work in. If you spent 7 weeks working on it with 10 people and this is what you got, then the tool is not doing what you think it's doing. And it was kind of a waste of effort.
I kind of want to know what tools they used so I don't use those, That could be part of our tool review.
I was going to say, I think it would be any of the tools, to be honest. I think it doesn't matter what you use.
But the backlash, I think, is bigger than just this looks bad because of that labor component. People were explicitly saying no actors, no camera team, no crew. But the subtext was McDonald's just fired a bunch of creatives to save money and still produced a bunch of AI slop. So
yeah. And that's definitely the moment that we're in as well. I think when people see AI being used in marketing, they're not just judging the output anymore. So it's not just looking at the ad and saying, okay, well, this looks like shit. They're now thinking, okay, well, who lost their job for this piece of shit?
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately,
there's significant amounts of like people who would, be part of this creative that do lose their jobs. So even though there's 10 people in the background creating it, there are a lot of lost jobs here. On the flip side, Coca-Cola did an AI Christmas ad at the same time, and it was totally fine. Mostly positive response, no big backlash. So clearly there's a difference.
So, I mean, I wouldn't say that there was no backlash. There's always going to be backlash when there's AI generated content. I would say that Coca-Cola was slightly smarter in how they went about this. They used AI as one tool in a bigger creative pipeline, but they didn't like make a big deal about the AI being the star of the show. So they had a concept, they had art direction, they had a story, and the AI was just helping execute it. In the new year, I have a friend who works at a creative agency who is actually a big fan of AI, and I'd really like to get him on to talk about this sort of stuff. But in this instance with McDonald's, the AI output was just the star of the show, and that's what people were not happy about.
I think the rule is you want the AI to be seamless. You don't want it to know that it's AI, right? So if the first thing people notice is this looks wrong, we have uncanny valley, this was made with AI, then I think you failed, right? The tool, it's always like you want the output and then you work back to the tech. AI is no different. It should be invisible. So if all of this AI bubble conversation is stirring up thoughts, questions, or if you've got your own story about how AI went sideways at your company, please drop us a line at hello@earlyadopter.ai. Remember, no E in the adopter.
And as always, if this episode resonated, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. We're on YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. Remember, @early_adopter on all platforms.
And share it with your friends and colleagues too.
Yes,
We've had some great referrals, and we want to continue to get to more people and get more stories out there. Right. But we're taking the next few weeks off for some best of episodes, and quite frankly, just because you got the holidays, I'm traveling, you're traveling. This is just going to give us some much needed R&R. But we are coming back in the new year, ready to dig deeper into 2026. I think it's going to be a transformative year. So much of what we've been discussing is setting up for a pretty substantial leap ahead. So we're pretty excited about what's going to come next.
I agree. So thank you for listening to Early Adopter, and we will see you in the new year.
Thanks, Jess.
Bye.